Good morning, Mr. Mkwena. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, today we'll be hearing the testimony of Mr. Snell Naga. He is an employee from ESCOM. The Rule 3.3 notices were dispatched, even though Mr. Naga in his testimony...
I noticed that you said Snella. Is
No,
that
it's-
how it is pronounced? I see.
Mr. Snell Naga.
Oh, okay.
Snell is the first name, Naga is the surname.
Oh, okay. No, I just wanted to make sure I pronounce it the right way.
That's the right way,
Okay.
Chair.
No, thank you.
Even though that in his statement he is mentioning a number of individuals, but in the main, in his statement, he is implicating only one person, and that is Ms. Naidu. And I'm informed that his legal team is here today. Subject to your directions, Mr. Chair, they may place themselves on record.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you. Mr. Naga's lawyers, are they, or is their leader not here? I saw you looking elsewhere, and I wondered whether you were expecting somebody else, not yourself, to rise.
Good morning, Deputy Chief Justice.
Good morning.
My name is Rothania Naidu, and
Yes.
I appear together with my learned senior Pule Seleka SC. We appear on behalf of Ms. Maya Naidu, who received a Rule 3 notice of today's proceedings. Thank you.
I'm sorry, you appear on behalf of?
Ms. Maya Naidu.
Oh, okay. I thought this name was different from what. Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, now I know why you were looking. You were looking for your leader. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, in order to meaningfully traverse the testimony of Mr. Naga, we will be relying and referring on an exhibit which we have already taken the liberty of marking it as Exhibit U2. I was also reliably informed, Mr. Chair, that it was placed before you, and to assist you to navigate through
Yes.
the file, may I request the Chair to turn to Exhibit U2. You will see that at the beginning of the file, there must be an index. And from that index, Mr. Chair,
Okay, I've marked it Exhibit U2.
U2, yes.
And there is an index.
And then in that index, Mr. Chair, just to assist you to navigate through the file, the statement of Mr. Naga commences from page 1 up until page 17. And thereafter, you'll find different annexures,
Yes.
which commences from page 18,
Yes.
and they run up until page 100.
Yes.
Those will be the annexures that we'll be referring to from time to time.
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Are some of them in the same file as his statement and others in the separate file that I see in front of me? Or don't
you
know
must be
about
only
this?
having, U2 contains, Mr. Chair,
Everything that I need for today.
everything that you need for now.
Oh,
The rest, you you may simply ignore,
okay.
and as when they become necessary for us to refer to them, we will bring that to your attention, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, a question might be posed as to where does one locate the evidence of Mr. Naga? The issues which he will be testifying upon were a subject matter of a number of investigations that were conducted by different bodies and institutions. You will recall, Mr. Chair, that at the commencement of this commission, my learned colleague, Ms. Norman, did place certain documents before you and the reports. Equally so, my learned colleague, Mr. Malika, during his opening address for this stream, the ESCOM stream, he did place some of those documents and reports before you. The issues which will be ventilated by Mr. Naga received the attention of the Public Protector, National Treasury, and Funduzi, which is a forensic investigation firm. All those reports, Mr. Chair, were placed before you. Mr. Naga's evidence, Mr. Chair, focuses on three main themes. Firstly, he will testify on an advance payment in an amount of 659,558,079 rands. In short, Mr. Chair, we can refer to it as the 659 million rands advance payment, which was made to Tegeta Exploration Resources by ESCOM. You will be told the extraordinary circumstances which this advance payment was made, and this includes a board meeting that took place at 9 o'clock at night, and Mr. Naga and his team were afforded less than 3 hours to make sure that payment is made before 2 o'clock the next day. Secondly, Mr. Chair, he will be testifying on the calculation of the penalty amount which ultimately led to the settlement agreement which was concluded between ESCOM and the Optimum coal mine and Tegeta. He will inform you that according to his computation, which he undertook together with his colleagues, the penalty amount which was supposed to be payable per his computation is in an amount of 2.1 billion, and he will take you through the various other computation up until the settlement. He will tell you that, however, the settlement agreement, despite those computation, the matter was ultimately settled in an amount of 255 million rands, meaning that there is huge sum of money which was not paid to ESCOM as per his computation. He will tell you, Mr. Chair, that his computation, took into account penalties such as the abrasive index, which we know that from time to time it must escalate. It took into account sizing, and it took into account CV and ash penalties. And those concepts we will explore with him through his testimony for him to elaborate on and to explain exactly his computation. And lastly, he will testify on a very unique and a bizarre ABSA guarantee, which was made in favor of the same company, Tegeta. And ordinarily, Mr. Chair, we know that a supplier is the one that must submit a guarantee to ESCOM, but in this instance, it was the other way around. ESCOM finished a guarantee, an ABSA guarantee, in favor of the same company, Tegeta. He will then give you more details around that, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the Public Protector, in her report, does give us a sense as to when we talk about Tegeta, what are we referring to? And she does that. You don't have to go to a report, Mr. Chair. I'm just mentioning it in passing. You may simply note the relevant page is a typed page 111, and at paragraph 5.42, of the report, she then explains to us as to when we refer to Tegeta, whom are we referring to? She says that the ownership structure of Tegeta is comprised as follows. 29.5 shares are held by a company known as Oak Bay Investments. And in turn, she explained to us as to who owns Oak Bay. She tells us that 79.99 it's owned by Oak Bay Resources and Energy, and 64% it's owned by Atul Gupta. And
I'm sorry, the
Sorry,
first
ma'am.
one,
Such-
Oak
the-
Bay is what, 25%?
she,
Are the sums, do the sums add up?
No, they don't add up,
The second
madam.
one was 79%.
I went ahead of myself. Let's start first as to who owns Tegeta.
Yes,
Tegeta is owned 29.05% by Oak Bay, and then 28.53% of Tegeta is owned by Mabengela Investment. And Mabengela Investment is owned by Duduzani Zuma, Rajesh Kumar Gupta, Arrow Heaven Trading, Fidelity Investment, Mfaz Investment, and Ashu Chawla. And other shares of Tegeta, 12.91, are owned by Fidelity, a company known as Fidelity, and 8.01 are owned by Accurate Investment Ltd, and 21.5 are owned by a company called Elga Solve. Those shares, Mr. Chair, then constitute the 100% ownership, shares held in Tegeta. And in paragraph 5.43, she summarizes those shares, Mr. Chair. And the National Treasury engaged the services of a company which we have referred to as Fundusi Forensic, which also was called upon to conduct a forensic investigation into the affairs of ESCOM with reference to specific conduct and transaction. May I refer to it because it was also placed before you by Mr. Maleka and my then colleague, Ms. Norman. If I may refer, Mr. Chair, to page 2 thereof, with specific reference to paragraph 1.10.1. The heading of that paragraph is styled as follows: detailed allegations relating to ESCOM. And the scope is, they say that we understand that the scope of our investigation will be independently investigate the following. 1.10.1, investigate why ESCOM gave and continued to give preferential treatment to Tegeta Exploration and Resources by not enforcing key conditions of the CSA, and whether it amounted to the abuse of position of authority, breach of trust, or violation of legal duty, or a set of rules in the Prevention of Combating of Corruption Activities Act. I find paragraph 1.10.7 also to be relevant. They say they were called upon to investigate whether the directives of ESCOM Board Tender Committee relating to advance payment were unlawful, and whether it amounted to abuse of position of authority, a breach of trust, or violation of legal duty, or set of rules in terms of PRECA. Those are the issues which also were interrogated as per the Fundusi report, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Mr. Naga then is here to give you a full account of his experiences pertaining to those three main topics. May the witness be sworn in, we are ready to proceed with his evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Mokoena.
Please state your full names for the record.
My name is Snehal Nagar.
Do you have any objections to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you swear that the evidence you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
Mr. Naga, may I refer you to an exhibit before you? You will see it's already marked as Exhibit U2. Do you have it before you?
Yes, I do.
If you may turn to page 1, immediately after the index. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Is that your statement?
Yes, it is.
May I request you to please turn to page 17.
I am there.
Is that your signature appearing there?
Yes, it is.
Do you confirm the contents of your statement to be both true and correct?
I do.
Do you confirm that your statement is in the form of an affidavit?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Thank you.
You are currently employed at ESCOM, am I correct?
Yes.
When did you join ESCOM?
I joined ESCOM in late October 2004.
Can you please share with us your employment history with ESCOM from 2004 to date?
I joined ESCOM in the Primary Energy Division
Yes.
as a junior finance advisor, assisting on the contracts from a finance perspective. I then progressed to, I progressed through the division to now where I ultimately head the finance area for the division.
Yes. And in your current capacity, what are your functions and responsibilities?
I look after the full finance function of the division. I guess to simplify it, my colleague Dan Mashigo gave you a organogram of the division and the various functions that the division performs. I look at that entire division from a finance perspective. So all the finance-related activities are under my responsibilities.
And what are your qualifications?
Chair, I'm a chartered accountant.
Just say that again.
I am a chartered accountant.
Thank you.
Sure.
Now, because we'll be dealing with different mandates, can you explain to the chair where does one locate that department which you are heading within ESCOM? You know, if you are looking at the structure of ESCOM, and where does one locate it?
Chair, the division itself has, over the last 3, 4, 5 years, changed quite a bit in terms of the ESCOM organogram. But currently, as it sits, it is sitting under the generation division, and under the generation division.
Now, do you have members of the team that are reporting to you?
Yes, I do.
And then in turn, do you report to someone else?
Currently, I report to a person by the name of Mr. Martin Bass.
And around 2016, who did you report to?
Around 2016, I either reported to a gentleman by the name of Stefan Cronier, who reported to Ms. Maya Naidu, or I reported directly to Mrs. Naidu. There was a transitional change in the structure, and I just can't remember when that transition occurred.
Yes. Now, do you recall that around that time, 2016, as to who was the CFO?
It was Mr. Anand Singh.
And who was the group chief executive officer around that time?
I think it was Mr. Brian Molefe. Yeah.
Now, you have told us about your division. Having that in regard, could you also please explain to us the approval processes in ESCOM?
Sure, Chair. There are essentially two main approval processes within ESCOM. We got what we call an investment process, so and then you've got a procurement process. The investment process is largely, if I had to simplify it, should I do something or should I not do something? As an example, should I build Medupi Power Station, should I not build Medupi Power Station? And for what should I build it for? The amount, quantum. So that's largely your investment approval process. The other approval, the mainstream approval process, is your procurement approval process. So it's with who do I build Medupi Power Station, if I simplify that example. So those are your two big approval structures within the organization that guide the organization in terms of what needs to be done.
Do you know if there are different committees, tender committees within those structures that in fact, the procurement structure itself? Do you have various other committees that are dealing with the tender processes?
Yeah. Chair, so what you have is the investment process and procurement process have different committees. The different committees have different approval limits. So you would start at a divisional level at about 300 million rand, and you'd work your way up to the Excel committees, which normally have, I think, between about a 500 and 750 million rand limit, then goes to a board investment and finance committee on the investment side, or a board tender committee, and then ultimately the board. Each committee has terms of reference and approval limits within what they can operate. I might not know that offhand.
Yes.
Okay.
No, that helps.
The first committee, I thought you were saying 300 billion. I guess you meant 300 million?
300 million.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's not necessarily first. I just started at 300. Depending on the
Oh,
operations of the
yes.
division, they might necessitate a lower approval limit.
Okay.
Now, may I refer you to page 2 of your statement? From paragraph 4, you begin to introduce the topic in relation to the payment which was made to Tegeta in an amount of 659 million rands. Am I right?
Yes.
Now, I just want to clarify that heading because it says payment to Tegeta Exploration and Resources in the amount of 659,558,07938 rands. Now, what I want to understand from you is that was this an advance payment, or was this a payment which was made for goods already received?
This was an advance payment. It was for goods that was still to be received at that time.
So when this amount was paid to Tegeta, no services at that time were rendered by Tegeta?
Chair, that's correct.
And paragraph 4.1, you'll see that it's divided into 2 paragraphs. Can you see that?
Yes.
Now, in the first paragraph of 4.1, you say that on the 12th April 2016, at 2:45 p.m., I received an email from Ayanda Nteta, subject titled FW ESCOM, pro forma invoice, attached as annexure SNO. The contents of this email state, as discussed, I cannot recall a discussion taking place on this matter with Ms. Ayanda Nteta. The attachment to the email was a pro forma invoice of 659 million rands. Am I correct?
That is correct, Chair.
Yes. Now, who is Ayanda Nteta?
Ayanda Nteta was...
And what was her role at the time her responsibilities at the time?
Yeah, so Chairperson, the exact role at the time, I just need to find out, but
That's
there was
fine,
a,
but tell us from where you can, where in as far as you can remember who was,
Yeah.
who was Ayanda Nteta?
Yanda and Teta used to, at one point, head the fuel procurement side or the fuel sourcing part of the primary energy division. That's the team that contracts or does the procurement of your coal contracts. She then progressed to head the division, the primary energy division or area within ESCOM. So at that time, it could be, I'm not too sure where exactly she was, but ultimately she then was the head of the division.
Yes. May I refer you to annexure SN0 on page 19?
Yes?
Is this the email that you refer that you received from Ayanda Nteta as per paragraph 4.1?
Chairperson, that's correct.
And what is the date of that email?
It's the 12th of April, 2016.
You'll see from that email it says as discussed.
That's correct, Chair.
Now, what I want to know from you is that did you discuss with Ms. Nteta an advance payment of 659 million on the 12th April 2016?
Chairperson, like I said in my affidavit, I cannot recall a discussion taking place, especially a discussion around a 659 million rand prepayment.
If it has taken place, will you remember?
Most probably, yes, Chair.
Now, I'm posing this question, Mr. Naga, because when you say to the chair that I don't recall, that can be subject to a number of interpretation. It may be that the discussion took place, but you simply do not recall, or you don't recall the discussion happening at all on that day. So could you please clarify that answer so that at least we know whether she discussed it with you or she did not discuss it with you?
Chairperson, like I said, I cannot recall a discussion with Ayanda Nteta on this issue. The point of this email, I think, more was, the point of the email was that if you look at the date of the transaction, which is, the date of this email, which is a pro forma invoice on April the 12th, when we proceed to the next discussion on the events that happened on the 13th, you will see that the contract was only signed on the 13th of April. So I have received an invoice, a pro forma invoice on the 12th of April when the actual contract was only signed on the 13th. And just putting the evidence in front of you, Chair. But I have not had a discussion. I cannot recall a discussion with her, and I cannot certainly recall a 659 million rand prepayment discussion with Ayanda.
Well, just 1 second. When you received the email, you must have reacted in a certain way upon seeing that the email was saying as discussed. You might not recall now, but at that time, it must be that it was clear in your mind that there had been no such discussion, or there had been, or even at that time when you received the email, are you saying you could not recall, as opposed to saying, yes, we did have some discussion, but maybe not in this detail, or we never had any discussion about the subject matter of this email?
Chairperson, we could have had a discussion not about the detail, not a 659 million rand prepayment detail.
Yes,
Had we had that, I would have probably remembered.
yes, yes.
We could have had a discussion, and I'm now using an example, as we could have had a discussion that said, is it possible to pay on a pro forma invoice? Where I said no. Hence, I did not look at this attachment at that time. And when I
Yes.
seen the email as discussed, I probably figured we had closed this issue and there was no need to delve into the email further. The substance of the email and this evidence came out when the Hawks approached me last year to give some evidence or information with regards to this, and while going through my documents, I seen it and I presented it to them.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Thank you.
I understand the examples that you preferred to the chair, but what I want to understand from you, I mean, we are dealing here with a very significant amount, and I don't want, to leave you with that ambiguity around your evidence. I need to understand that if indeed there was that discussion, as the chair has put to you, would you be able to recall that on that day you discussed this advance payment, or you did not discuss this advance payment?
Chairperson, if I had had a discussion with her about a 659 million rand prepayment, I would have most probably remembered that
Yes.
discussion.
Okay. Now,
So what you are clear about, let me just confirm, what you are clear about is that you never had any discussion with her that mentioned this figure.
That mentioned the 659 million
Yes.
rand prepayment. No,
Yeah, about that you are clear.
yes. Otherwise, I
Whatever
don't remember.
discussion you might have had with her might have touched on whatever, but certainly this figure was not mentioned. You had never had any discussion involving the mentioning of this amount.
No, Chair, otherwise it would have stuck out.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. Is that because of the high amount, the big amount that the figure is, why you would have remembered?
Chairperson,
Or why
if it-
would you have remembered if the amount had been mentioned?
I don't, in the context of what we do, the 659 million rand is not necessarily a high amount.
Yes.
We spend between 50 and 70 billion rand a year on coal.
Yes,
So 659 million is not necessarily a high figure.
Yes.
What would have stuck out is if there was a prepayment issue,
yes,
which is the unusual part.
yeah,
So
okay.
maybe that's to put that into
Okay.
context.
Okay, so any discussion that would have involved discussing a prepayment, that you would have remembered?
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And there never was such a discussion?
No.
Yeah, okay.
may I refer you to page 20? Can you please identify that document?
Chair, this is the pro forma invoice that we have just been discussing.
Yes.
That was the attachment to the email received from Ayanda and Data.
And what is the date of that pro forma invoice?
The date of the pro forma invoice is the 12th of April, 2016.
Now, from your own experience, having been at ESCOM for these years, is it a normal practice that any payment could be effected on a pro forma invoice?
No, Chair, we do not pay, we do not make any payment on a pro forma invoice.
Let me just step back a bit to what we discussed about what you remember and what you don't remember a few minutes ago. Was there ever any discussion before you received this email? Was there ever a discussion in terms of which the sender of the email may have said to you, I'm going to send you a certain pro forma invoice without mentioning any figure?
Chairperson, that is possible. No, sorry, wait, Chair, let me just, there was not a discussion about a prepayment. There could have been a discussion about a payment on a pro forma invoice.
Yes, okay.
Yes, and not
okay.
mentioning the amounts.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, all right, thank you.
Now, while you're still on page 20, you see on the description of the, after the pro forma invoice heading, you have what is indicated there as the contract ref. Then a number is being provided. What would be that? What would that number signify? And I'm posing this question in relation of this being a pro forma invoice that was dispatched to you.
Chairperson, this is not an ESCOM number. It is probably a Tegeta number. The reason why I say that is normally a contract number for an ESCOM, a ESCOM contract number starts with a 46 number, not a 45 number. So I would assume this is a Tegeta contract reference. They might label their contracts in a certain way. I don't know what it is.
But you also say that normally and under normal ESCOM practices and procedures, one would not effect any payment, be it a pre-payment or any payment premised on a pro forma invoice.
That is correct.
And also when this email was dispatched to you, there were no supporting documents. As at that 12 April 2016. Remember that we are working on the date of this invoice.
No, the only attachment to that email was this pro forma invoice. There was no contract underpinning this invoice
No, any supporting documents.
or any supporting documentation. That is correct.
Now, could you please refer back to page 2 of your statement? You'll see,
I'm sorry, Mr. Mkwena. I don't know whether you are moving away from this pro forma invoice because you are done, or you will still come back.
I'm coming back to it, but Mr. Chair, you can pose the questions. It's
No,
fine.
no, that's fine if you are coming back to it, yeah. You can continue.
Now, I was referring to page 2 of your written statement, the second paragraph thereof.
Yes.
You will see in that paragraph, you begin now with the events of the 13th April 2016.
That is correct.
Yes. Now, before I seek clarity on a number of things, can you, in your own words, just tell Mr. Chair as to what happened on that day?
Chairperson, on the 13th of April 2016, it was around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. I received a call from Ms. Naidu while driving to a client in, I think it was in Pretoria. Ms. Naidu instructed us to make a payment that was approved by the board tender committee to the amount of 659 million. She had also indicated that the payment needs to be made within 2 to 3 hours time or before 2 p.m. We then had a bit of a discussion where she said that she would formalize, or I requested her to formalize the instruction via email, to also send us all the supporting documentation around this process so that we could effect it. We also had a discussion about the other legs of this transaction. The other legs of the value chain that need to come on board to play a part in this payment. When I say the other legs, I'm referring to, as an example, like the Treasury Division needs to make the money available. The shared services team who operate the bank account, if I had to put it that way, need to be on board to effect the payment. We would obviously need to process the payment. So everyone needed to be on board to effect this payment. And Ms. Naidu said that, she would chat to whoever she had to, if she hadn't already chatted to them, and make sure they were on board. Yes, Chair. That's summarizing the events of the 13th and the telephone call.
At the time when you received this call, where were you? You were not in the office, I take it.
No, I was driving. I was on my way to a client in Pretoria.
Yes. Now, who is Ms. Maya Bana?
Ms. Maya Bana is she was the GM, she's a general manager in the finance division, and she was in the office of the chief financial officer, Anod Singh.
She's now Ms. Naidu, am I correct?
Ms. Naidu, yes.
Yes. So we'll refer, for the purpose of these proceedings, we'll refer to her as Ms. Naidu, so that there's no confusion. Now,
Well, I'm sorry. At the time of these events, she was known as Miss Bana. Or was she already known as Miss Naidu? Or can you not recall?
I cannot recall. There was a time when Ms. Naidu changed her surname from a maiden name to a married surname, and
Yes, okay.
I can't recall exactly when.
Okay, all right.
were you giving any facts as to why was this prepayment supposed to be done on this agent basis?
Chair, from the phone call, no. I think it was just, you've got 2 to 3 hours to do this thing. The board tender committee has approved it. We didn't get into the details of the transaction itself. It was more about we were going to forward you the details of the transaction and then you would effect it. So at that time, no, Chair.
I'm posing this question because it is not as if you were expecting to get goods immediately. This was an advance payment for coal that will be delivered sometime in the future. And why was the payment so urgent to be effected on that specific day?
Chairperson, when on the phone call that we had, if I can recall, we didn't have a discussion about a prepayment. It was a discussion about there needs to be a payment made. It needs to be done in 3 hours, and we will send you the documentation. The details of the transaction unfolded later.
And did you,
Before that, you have been at ESCOM since 2004, as I recall what you said.
Yes, Chair.
So, and as at 2015, you were about, what, 9 years at ESCOM?
Yeah, rough.
Roughly, or
10,
10, 11 years.
Yes.
Yeah, my arithmetic is not so good. Had you ever had an occasion where payment was required to be made so urgently? Was that something that happened from time to time? Payment must be made within a few hours, with 2 or 3 hours, few hours of an instruction being given to pay.
No, Chair.
It had never happened.
No, not in that time frame.
Yeah. What is your recollection of the shortest time within which you were instructed to make payment? When I say you or your colleagues in your department, in terms of your experience over all the years that you had been at ESCOM, what's the shortest time that you were asked to effect a payment?
Chair, if I can put your question in context.
Yes.
When you could have possibly requested to make an urgent payment for something that was owed, but where a transaction was quite far down the line. So what I
Yes.
mean by that is where you've already have an order, you
Yeah.
have a dispute,
Yeah.
and the dispute is outstanding, and now it is just a matter of,
Yeah.
okay, we've come to an agreement, it's now just settlement.
Yes.
That could have been done within a couple hours because the system was already set up and geared up for that.
Oh, okay.
In this particular transaction, you were still at sort of, I want to say, contracting stage where you got a signed contract.
Yes.
It's a little bit far back. So
Yes.
we have had instances where you have probably made a payment quite quickly,
Yes.
but not on a transaction so far back.
Yes, okay.
And I'll explain some of the
Yes.
detail as to why.
Yes.
Yeah.
Once you knew more about the transaction, then you could tell what's different between it and what you normally did.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right.
Flowing from the chair question, it's quite clear that in this instance, nothing was owed to any supplier when this transaction was made.
That is correct.
Yes. And no goods were received. We are moving from that premise.
That is correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
And did you know at this stage the true nature of this transaction? Or you were simply informed that the payment must be effected agently without true facts being disclosed to you?
No, Chair, at the point where we had a discussion on the telephone, we did not have the details to the transaction. It was simply a payment.
And you were told that documentation would be sent to you shortly.
Yes, I had requested the documentation to be
Yes,
sent, and
yeah.
I had requested the instruction to be put,
Yes.
to be put formally.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Now, may I clarify another thing? Was this a request or an instruction to you to effect this payment on this agent basis?
Chair, it's an instruction.
Instruction.
Yeah.
Now, also, if you can assist us, under normal circumstances where all processes are followed, how long would it take for such an amount to be properly paid to a supplier? And what documents you would have to scrutinize for you to be comfortable that you can effect that payment?
Chairperson, so I'm going to mention roles, I'm going to mention processes. Understand when I mention a role and a process, there is inherently a segregation of duties, meaning it's normally a different person that does it. So if you want to do a transaction like this, you need all the parties present at that point in time with access to the system that are clicking yes and no and approving for something to go through. So if this transaction was at the start of its process, what you would generally do is you would get the person who has the need for the product to raise what we would call a purchase requisition. So that's almost like the step one of your procurement process.
That's like a request for payment.
No, that's like a request for goods.
For goods.
Or for goods?
Yes.
Okay.
So you would first start off, the very start of the process is, I need something, and when you need that something, you would load a purchase request. Now, generally in our...
So you are, in other words, asking for approval that you can go ahead and purchase something?
Yes,
Yes,
sort of.
okay.
That's the starting point.
Yes,
And
okay.
generally in our environment, it is the coal operations team or the contract managers that would ask, I need coal, I'm short of it, and can I load a purchase request? That purchase request then goes to that requester's manager. And normally that manager would be a cost center manager or cost center owner. And he would approve the request, saying your request is valid. Once that's done, the transaction would go from the head of the procurement to a different person called the management accountant, who would look at, one, is the request correctly accounted for from an accounting perspective? And two, you would also look at whether it's budgeted for. So is there funds? Once that's done, Chair, it then goes from a management accountant to a...
Okay,
Yeah.
don't forget what you wanted to say. One, there is the purchase requester, if we can call it that.
Yes.
Okay. Then it goes to the purchase requester's superior, is that right?
Yes.
The manager who then approves if
Yes.
he or she approves. That's stage 2. Then it goes to stage 3 where somebody checks whether the purchase request has been done properly and whether there are funds.
Correct?
That is stage 3.
Stage 3.
Okay, all right. Then you can continue. Just want to follow the
Stage-
stages, yeah.
Stage 4, it then goes to a procurement manager. And the procurement manager, so that's stage 4. So the procurement manager looks at the procurement, and he allocates it to a buyer, which is stage 5.
You say the procurement manager looks at procurement. What do you mean when you say he looks at procurement? And what is he having now in front of him
All he has is,
or her?
he or her, sorry, he or her has this request in from, so remember, you've got a contract manager that has a need. It's now gone to the buying department who will execute this need. And stage 1, 2, 3, which is the requester, manager, and management accountant, that leg is only the request part. Then you've now gone to the procurement team, and the procurement team now gets this instruction. And the manager then has a whole lot of procurement people, and he needs to allocate this to somebody. So he'll allocate it to a buyer. Now this procurement buyer now has, call it a PR in the system. Now, Chairperson, when you look at this transaction, that is step 1 that should have been done even before the contract was actually signed. So when you go to the tender committee for approval, when you say, I want to buy coal, I want to do something, you take this request that has been loaded on the system saying, I've loaded this request, and you go to the committee and you say, I need to buy. Now, that part of the leg was not done at the time we requested to make this payment. So there's a pre-leg that was not done. Now there's a leg after that I'm going to explain that had to still be done. And even that would have taken time had all this been in place at the time we were requested to make the transaction. So after the procurement manager issues this to the buyer has a PR number. Now in this particular case, if an approval, sorry, go.
PR number is what? Procurement number? Or what is it?
A procurement reference number, yes.
Okay, all right.
So once this buyer has this reference number, you would go to the tender committee, you would seek approval to negotiate a contract. You would then conclude the contract, depending on what the outcome of the procurement tender committee would have been. And you would then hand this signed contract to the buyer. It's normally the buyer that would have effected that process. The buyer then creates a contract number for that particular contract. And the buyer will link that procurement request number to the contract number. And that becomes the start of this process. Now that should have been in place if the system was normal. So now you get to a point where if that was in place and this instruction came, we would have asked the contract manager, because for every contract that gets gets approved at Eskom, and there's a specific person that gets appointed to manage the contract. And I think they call the form a DCF form, a delegated consent form. So one person is accountable for that, for managing that contract. So that contract manager would have drawn a purchase order. So he would have ordered goods from this particular contract or entity that underpins that contract. When that order comes in, it would have then had to be settled. So it would have gone to another management accountant, not the same one, to say, I have received these goods. Once you settle that goods, the order and that then goes to a shared services team who captures an invoice. So it's almost like a three-way check. Now you've got the operator of the bank account who's checking whether the invoice matches to the order, matches to the goods receipt.
But throughout that process, Mr. Naga, there will be documents that must be scrutinized and verified.
Absolutely.
In order for you to be satisfied that whatever amount that will be leaving Eskom will be accounted for.
Absolutely.
And I assume that each person who has had to deal with this in that chain that you have explained would sign or make some indication that he or she has seen what was before him or her, and if she thought everything was in order, there would be some indication given that he or she has no problem.
Yes, Chair, and
Yeah.
that would be evidenced by the approval systems on the system. Yes. Yeah.
So that if you are at stage number 5 in the chain or in the sequence, you would look whether all the other people involved at stages 2, 3, 4, whether they have no queries, or if there are queries, whether those queries have been sorted out before you can say, okay, it can go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Then before you proceed, at a certain stage, I think it may have been stage 5, you say, or maybe even stage 6, you might not have mentioned stage 6 by name, but at a certain stage you say somebody must, I think, issue a contract number.
Yes.
Am I right? That's what you said.
So every contract
Yeah,
that's loaded onto the system
yes,
will have a unique contract number,
yeah,
and they link the contract number to the purchase request.
yes. But what I want to ask now is, when you refer to a contract or contract number at that stage, does that mean necessarily that there must be a contract, a formal contract in existence relating to the goods that are sought to be purchased or services or whatever, or that's just for convenience because it is known that at some stage in this whole chain a contract will be concluded?
No, Chair. The contract number is only issued when the contract is in place.
When there is a formal
Formal
contract.
contract, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
yeah.
that you're at a stage where you're now capturing the signed contract onto the system.
Yes. This system that you have described to us, it wouldn't apply, would it, to a situation where ESCOM wants to buy something but really doesn't need to have a contract for that? One can think of all kinds of things, not big things, Is that right? That would be subject to a different process.
It is. So the procurement processes are specifically mentioned. So you've got sort of what we call one-time purchases, which are low-value items.
Yes.
And they will not necessarily have a specific contract number, but they
Yes.
have a specific unique identifier in any event.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
that's what, yeah. Okay, thank you.
But let's clarify that I know that I've intervened at the time when we were talking about the shared services. We'll return to that. What I want to clarify from the questions of the chair is that for one to have a contract of this magnitude, there must have been a preceding procurement process.
That is correct.
Yes. So there must be, one can never assume by simply looking at the pro forma invoice that there was a procurement process that has taken place when there is a number that's being indicated that there must be, in fact, one must satisfy himself that there must have been procurement
Chair, no,
processes.
Mr. McQueen, I might be a little confused with your question. The contract number that is reflected on that invoice.
I'm sorry, I think come closer to your mic.
Sure.
Yes.
The contract number that is reflected on that pro forma invoice
Yes.
is not an ESCOM contract number.
No, I understand. What I'm asking a different question. What I want to know from you is that from all those levels, the stages that you've mentioned to the chair, and when the chair asks you about the contract number, for one to have a contract number, there must have been a preceding procurement process held within ESCOM itself.
Yes, correct.
And you mentioned that one of the stages that you mentioned was that the process would also go to shared services.
The shared services team, yes.
Now you can take it from there and complete the entire process. What then happens?
So,
Yeah, and maybe connected with that question, just clarify at what stage does it go to shared services?
no, so Chairperson, maybe if I can just step one step back, and I said there is a buyer with this procurement reference number, and it also has a contract number. So once the contract and those two are linked, the contract is now given over, if I can, to the contract manager who manages the contract. The contract, now if I was receiving goods and services, the system is normally set up to receive goods and then pay for it. So what the contract manager would do is order the goods. So he would place an order on the system. The order, when the goods are received, the goods receipt note, if I had to call it as that, is matched against the order and settled. So I ordered something, I've now received it, and it's matched. When that is done so there's a person that orders, there's a different person that matches the goods, that receives the goods or creates the goods receipt. Once those two are put together, it is then sent, that transaction is sent to the shared services team. Now what the shared services team does, Chair, is captures the invoice. And they match that invoice to the order and the goods receipt. And when all three tie, the payment is ready for payment in line with the contract. And then they effect the payment. So that's roughly the process, Chair.
So the shared services are the ones who effect the payment, or they just check that everything matches and then they send an email or something to somebody to say, now you can pay?
Chair, they are the operators of the bank account. So they effect the bank.
Okay,
Yeah,
so they effect the payment.
absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And the contract manager that you talked about, is he or she different from the buyer that the procurement manager would have given the contract?
Yes, they are different.
They are different.
Yes.
From the buyer, it goes to the contract manager.
Yeah, the buyer effects the procurement part of it.
Yes.
Meaning they do the contracting and the...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the contract manager then gets this once it is contracted. So he gets a
Yes.
signed contract to operate.
Yes, okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
I was posing this question in order to direct you back to the pro forma invoice on page 20. When it was received by yourself, this elaborate process that you have taken the chair through did not happen at all.
No.
Was it normal for you or your section or department to receive an instruction from Ms. Naidu or Ms. Bana to make any payment? Was that a normal thing for such an instruction to come from her? Not an instruction relating to a payment that has got the fissures that we are dealing with, but just a normal, was it normal, would it be normal for her to have asked you or instructed you to make any payment?
Chairperson, I don't think it's normal. So if I had to call normal would be us in the ordinary course of business buying stuff
After
and paying
following
for it.
this
Yes,
chain
and
that
following
you
a
have-
proper
yes,
process.
Yes.
Maya does, however, work in the office of the CFO, and to the extent that there was a transaction or something that needed to be done which specifically, I guess, came from the CFO, or there was a dispute or some issue which generally would not have been closed by the team, the primary energy team, that would have probably come from Maya to our team.
Okay,
It could be various forms, not necessarily just a payment.
okay, thank you. The Maya you refer to being Ms.
Naidu.
Maya Bana or Naidu?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Now, in relation to this specific contract, having regard to the processes and the short time that you had to carry out the instruction, could you ascertain whether for this specific contract there was budget for 659 million? For this specific contract?
Chairperson, for this specific contract, we don't budget for a prepayment, but we budget to buy coal. And like I said, we spend anywhere between 40 and 70 billion rand a year, depending on which year you're looking at. So there was budget to buy the coal. There wasn't budget to pay a prepayment, but it's one and the same thing. It's not one and the same thing. We budget to buy coal. Let me put it that way and leave it there. Yeah.
Well, this pro forma, this email and the pro forma invoice, Is that all the documentation that Ms. Bana/Naidu sent to you in accordance with the telephone conversation she had had with you?
No, Chair,
Or did she send you
might be
more
a bit-
documents?
No. The pro forma invoice was sent to me on the 12th of April.
Yes.
So that was the day before by Ms. Ayanda Inteta.
Oh, okay, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
On the 13th of April, so that's a separate issue now.
Yes.
On the 13th of April is when I got a telephone call from Ms. from Ms. Naidu at around 10:11 a.m. in the morning. And then we received a formal instruction from Ms. Naidu to a few players at 12:38 p.m.
Yes.
And that email, that formal instruction, had quite a bit of the supporting documentation that was required for this
Okay.
transaction.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Back to the question that I posed to you. Can one be able to generate a purchase order if, there is no budget for that specific contract? How can that happen?
Chairperson, the way you would do that is, so like I said, the system is set up where you order goods. When you receive the goods, you pay for it.
Yes.
In this case, you almost, I want to call it fooling the system, if that's the right word to use. But what you're doing is you're creating an order and you're settling that order as if you've received the goods immediately to effect a prepayment.
Yes. When in fact those goods were not received. As you correctly say, that you'll be fooling the system or doing something outside the processes, the normal process of ESCOM.
It's outside of the way the system is set up to buy and receive goods. The contract was an approved contract that said, please prepay, which is something from a construct point of view different. Yeah.
Now, you were told by Ms. Naidu that this payment was also approved by the board. Am I correct? As per paragraph 4.1.
Board tender committee.
Yes, board tender committee. But however, at the time when you had to carry out this instruction, you were not aware of such an approval from the board.
No, Chair.
And Ms. Naidu also assured you that Treasury and the shared services were also on board in order to carry out this instruction. That's what you said in the statement.
They were on board or would be on board?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, can you explain to the chairs, before we deal with other questions, the respective responsibilities of the two, the Treasury and shared services, in relation to effecting normal payment? I'm not talking about the pre-payment.
Chair, the Treasury team would draw on their banking facilities to make the money available. And they would make that money available in a certain bank account. The shared services team, like I had said earlier, is the operator of the bank account. They would physically then, all the invoices for ESCOM that require, or all the payments that need to be effected, they would then effect that bank account, or operate the bank account to pay it. So, yeah.
While you were driving, there's only one document that you said you requested from Ms. Naidu, and that was the BTC resolution. Am I correct?
No, Chair. We had requested all the supporting documentation related to this transaction. One of those documents that we had requested was also the Board Tender Committee resolution. But understand that at the time when we requested, we weren't sure what this transaction looked like. So please give me all the supporting documentation that would be required around this transaction.
And now you are basically emphasizing what you said to her on the phone on the 13th of April when she mentioned that there was this urgent payment to be made.
That is correct.
Yes. And she would have known what documentation you were talking about, because she would know what documentation is normally required before payment is made. Is that right? When you said, please send me the documentation, she would have known what you were expecting.
Chair, I think the conversation was around give me all the supporting documentation, and we mentioned some of the supporting documentation. So the documentation we would have asked her on the phone as well would have been, well, please give me first the invoice, give me the contract, give me the board tender committee document. And because I don't know the construct of this agreement, give me whatever else I need that's necessary to effect this transaction. That would have been the line of
Okay.
discussion. Yeah.
And at the time, we understand that you were driving. Did you request assistance of any other people from your office to help you to effect this agent payment?
Yes, Chair. Because I was not in the office, I had requested my one of my senior members of my team, Christo Kruger, to help me effect this transaction.
Christo who?
Mr. Christo Kruger.
Okay. Now, do you know when this request was made to you, whether any financial evaluation was done? Did you seek that information from Ms. Naidu or from anyone else before the payment was effected?
Chairperson, no. Normally I assume you're talking about a financial evaluation of the supplier.
Yes.
Chairperson, that
Take into account this amount. I know that you say that in ESCOM terms, this is not such a huge amount, but 659, by all accounts, is quite a huge amount.
No, Chairperson,
Million.
on all of our contracts, we generally tend to do a financial evaluation of some sort. But from a process perspective, the financial evaluation is done when you're requesting a mandate to negotiate and conclude. So before the conclusion of the contract, depending on what you are requesting, the financial evaluation of a supplier is done at that stage. At this particular stage of the transaction is here's a signed contract, please effect the payment. There's no financial evaluation done at that stage. So to answer the question, no, we have not done a financial evaluation or did not do one on Tegeta Resources at this point in time.
Mr. Chair, unless my watch is fast, says it's now about 1:15. Would this be convenient to adjourn?
Yeah.
I want to move on to another point.
Yes, we'll take the short adjournment and resume at 11:30. We adjourn.
All right.
You may proceed, Mr. Mkwena.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Naga, may I refer you to page 22? You will see its annexure SN1. Can you please take us through those emails, identify them first, and take us through, starting with the one from the bottom?
Chairperson, this is an email from Ms. Maya Naidu. At this stage, you can see she was still Ms. Maya Bana on the system. But this is an email from Ms. Maya Bana to quite a few role players in this value chain that we just discussed earlier. The value, you can see Muvenda is the shared services person, Christo is in my team, it's myself, it's Andre Pillay, who's the treasurer for ESCOM, so the treasury function, that value chain that needed to play a part. Rajan is was from the shared services team, and Charles is from the treasury team. So the subject of the email is payment to be made before 2 p.m. today.
Importantly, the date is?
The date is April the 13th, 2016, and the very important thing is the time, which is 12:38 p.m.
Yes. So this instruction had to be carried almost within an hour or so?
It's 1 hour and 22 minutes.
Yes. And take us through the contents?
If I can read it, Chair. So it basically says, hello all. Please can we fast track payment today before 2 p.m. It then references to two things. Point 1, 2 invoices as requested and approved for payment, approximately 60 million rand. Today, subject to early settlement discount of 1%. And point 2, attached invoice for 659 million. And it has 2 further references. It says, see attached contract addendum, which was the contract that was signed for the effecting of the 659 prepayment. And point B says, copy of the extract of the BTC meeting on Monday and this morning will be forwarded by Suzanne during the course of today. Please let me know if you require any additional information. Kind regards, Maya.
Yes. Would I be correct that one of the documents which was attached to this email is to be found on page 25?
That is correct.
And on page 25, Annexure SN2, it's a resolution by Tegeta, am I correct?
That is correct.
And we also see the different shareholders of Tegeta who have appended their signatures on the resolution.
That is correct.
Now, if you look at the date of that meeting, it was held on the 13th April 2016, am I correct?
That is correct.
This is the same day you received an instruction to effect payment.
That is correct.
And this is the same day when Tegeta itself received this payment.
That is correct.
There's something else that I need you to clarify. If you can keep page 25 open. And also page 20. Keep page 20 and page 25 open. Now, the date on the pro forma invoice is the 12th of April 2016, am I correct?
That is correct.
How was it possible, I mean, you may answer if you're able to, that Tegeta, before its meeting on the 13th of April 2016, already dispatches a pro forma invoice on the 12th of April 2016? Does that make sense? What did they know which you did not know at the time?
Chairperson, it does not make sense and I cannot answer that question.
Yes. So, flowing from this chronology, we know that as per Annexure SN2 on page 25, Tegeta could have only made a resolution about the advance payment on the 13th of April. Yet, when you look at Annexure SN20, which was sent to you, it was done a day before the meeting took place. Would that be a correct summary of what we see?
Chairperson, that is correct.
Yes.
Do you know whether this was an ordinary meeting of the board referred to which produced this resolution? When I say ordinary, I mean a scheduled meeting that is part of the normal planning of the board. Is that something you would know, or is that something you would not know?
Chair, I would firstly not know, and secondly, Chair, this is a Tegeta a board resolution. It's not an ESCOM board.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. No, thanks. Yes. I
Now-
missed that.
Now, there's something else which appears to be strange, but you might be able to assist the chair. If you may turn to page 32, and please also keep page 25 open. Now, on page 25, we know you have identified the document as the resolution of Tegeta. And on page 32, this is one of the documents, I take it, which were annexed to your email. That is now the resolution of the board of Transnet, am I right? Of ESCOM.
Of the board tender committee, Chair.
Yes, of the board tender committee.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, let's spend some time on the document on page 32. The resolution of ESCOM's board tender committee. According to this document, the meeting was held on the 11th of April, 2016. Do you confirm?
Yes, I do. That's correct.
It was held at 9 o'clock, 2100 hours at night. Do you also confirm?
That is correct.
It was held by means of a telecon.
That is correct.
Now, can you please, for the importance of this resolution, read paragraph 2.1.2 and 2.1.3? If you can read them, please.
Chair, 2.1.2 states as follows. The Chief Financial Officer is hereby authorized to approve the basis for prepayment to secure the fixed coal price for the period of extension provided that there is a discount in the price, the supplier offers a guarantee in favor of ESCOM, and that the CFO can provide assurance to the committee that the transactions are economically viable for ESCOM. 2.1.3 states, the Group Executive Generation is hereby authorized to take all the necessary steps to give effect to the above, including the signing of any consents or any documentation necessary or related thereto.
Yes. Now, if we deal with the chronology of events, it would mean that on the 11th of April 2016, even before the supplier, that is now Tegeta, could approach ESCOM about the advance payment, ESCOM board has already resolved to do that. Now you are contrasting the document on page 32 with the one on page 25.
That is,
The one on page 25
Yes.
That meeting took place only on the 13th of April 2016. The one on page 32 took place on the 11th of April 2016. So the one on page 32 precedes the one on page 25. Am I correct?
Chair, you're correct.
So this is not a case whereby Tegeta could have approached ESCOM to say that they are maybe in distress or they are unable to fulfill their contractual obligations, and as a result, they request an assistance by having to avail themselves to a pre-advance payment.
Yes, Chair, I can speculate about something if you want me to speculate. Otherwise, I cannot confirm the facts to these minutes in any way.
I understand.
Both ESCOMs and the
Tegeta one. But
yes.
what you can confirm for the chair is the following, that the meeting of ESCOM took place on the 11th of April 2016 and the one of Tegeta on 13th April 2016.
Per these documents, I can confirm that, Chair.
Now, as part of the resolution that you have read on page 32, were you provided any guarantee in favor of ESCOM from Tegeta before the payment was advanced at 2 o'clock?
No, Chair, I personally or our team was not provided with this guarantee.
Despite what the resolution said?
Chair, the resolution states that the CFO needs to make sure that the guarantee is in place.
Yes.
The CFO doesn't need to give me that guarantee.
But I'm saying that the people that are giving instructions, and I'm talking about the chain that you elaborately, you did, inform the chair about in the different stages. At this time, when you effected the payment, you did not see any guarantee that was received from Tegeta.
Chair, I confirm when we did the transaction or effected this transaction, and to date, we have never as a team received these guarantees. But I need to confirm one more thing is that we don't need the guarantees to effect the transaction. The guarantee is a security, and you would only call on the security if the need arises.
Yes, but the question still stands that at the time when you effected this payment, you have never seen these guarantees.
That is correct.
That the money that is leaving ESCOM would be secured by any form of guarantees.
That is correct. We have never seen them.
The resolution of the Special Board Tender Committee that appears at page 32 says in paragraph 2.1.2, the Chief Financial Officer is hereby authorized to approve the basis for prepayment to secure the fixed coal price. Do you know what it's intended to mean when it says he was authorized to approve the basis for the prepayment as opposed to he was authorized to approve the prepayment? What's your understanding of what the Special Board Tender Committee was meant to say there?
Chair, I would be absolutely speculating, to be frank.
Yeah.
I would not know. I mean, my understanding is this would be what he needed to effect the prepayment agreement that was in front of me.
Yes.
But that's as far as I can really speculate on this thing.
Yes, okay, all right.
And if you look at paragraph 2.1.2 and 2.1.3, there were individuals who were given certain authorities. Who are those?
It's the 2.1.2 is the CFO, and 2.1.3 is the Group Executive Generation.
Can you remind us their names, by the way?
So the Chief Financial Officer was Mr. Anod Singh, and the Group Executive Generation at that time was Mr. Machela Koko.
May I refer you to page 26?
Maybe before you do so, this board tender committee meeting was held by way of a telephone conference that is at page 32. Is it something you would know, or is it something you would not know whether it was normal for them to hold meetings by way of a telephone conference?
Chair, I would not be able to answer that.
You would not know?
No.
Okay, all right. And then your answer would apply also to whether it was normal for them to hold meetings so late in the night, 2100 hours. You would not know either whether that was normal for them.
That is correct. I would not be able to answer that.
Okay, all right.
Page 26, Mr. Naga.
Did you say 26, Mr.
26, yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
This is one of the documents which were finished to yourself at the time when the instruction was given to you. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Can you identify the document?
This is the, if I had to call it, the prepayment contract, or the contract to buy the coal under the prepayment condition.
Yes. And then if you turn to page 29, who signs on behalf of ESCOM?
It is Mr. Machela Coco. I mean, I can't attest for his signature, but the name here is Mr. Machela Coco, and it is witnessed by, seems, Mr. Anod Singh.
Okay. Are you able to at least recognize the signature of the witness? You know it.
This seems like Anod's signature. Machela's I can't
Yes.
confirm right now. Okay.
And what date was this document signed?
It was signed on the 13th of April 2016.
The same day when a request was made for an agent payment. And
That is correct, Chair.
now, if you may refer back to page 26, you'll see that paragraph 1 deals with the mandate of the board, the board tender committee, and paragraph 2, the following is recorded: in order to enable Tegeta to undertake the required supply and delivery of coal to Amot or any other power station as ESCOM may direct, ESCOM has agreed to advance funds to Tegeta in order for Tegeta to continue to supply and deliver coal to ESCOM in terms of the existing coal supply agreement. You confirm that's what is recorded therein.
That is correct.
Now, in terms of the chronology, we know that the meeting of ESCOM, the board tender committee, was held on the 11th of April 2016.
That is correct.
And we know that the one of the board of Tegeta, as we've already stated, it was held on the 13th of April 2016.
Correct.
We don't have anything which shows that Tegeta did approach ESCOM to advance payment to it in that sum of money. Anything coming from Tegeta as a request to ESCOM.
I mean, maybe I'm not understanding your question. So this is the contract that underpins that request. If that's the request, or are you asking me, did we receive an email saying, please give me 659 million prepayment?
Yes, or anything that could have actually made ESCOM to assist Tegeta to advance that amount.
I am not aware of any request, Chair.
Now, may I refer to paragraph 4.2.1? And I'm asking those questions in the light of what is recorded in this agreement. It says that Tegeta will procure that for supply to Eskom from Optimum Mine in terms of the existing coal supply agreement for 5 months period commencing from 16 April 2016 to 30 September 2016, a 3.5 discount shall be applied to the agreed price of 20.41 by gigajoule. Accordingly, the price payable for supply from the OCM mine shall be 19 rand 69 cents per gigajoule. And you'll see also on paragraph 4.2.2, it says that in lieu of the advance payment in respect of all invoices issued by Tegeta to Eskom relating to supply of coal from Optimum Colliery, total invoices at the end of each month commencing 16 April 2016, Tegeta shall procure that it issues a credit note to Eskom equaling of 659 million rands in advance, and until the full amount of the advance payment has been recovered in full. These were the terms. When did you see these terms of this agreement? On the same day or subsequent to the payment having been advanced?
When did I see it?
Yes.
So, Chair, I seen it after the payment was already processed. Remember, I said I was driving to a client and I was at a client meeting. So my team that assisted me in effecting this transaction would have seen it after 12:38 p.m. on the email that was sent from Ms. Naidu. That's the time we would have first seen this agreement and the terms and conditions underpinning it. If you ask, the question is, when did I see it? I seen it after the transaction was done, when I returned to the office on that day.
Yes. Now, may I refer you to page 3, paragraph 4.3 of your statement.
Page 3.
Am I correct that the contents of that paragraph records what transpired on the 13th of April 2016?
That is correct.
And we know that in terms of your paragraph 4.2, you requested Ms. Naidu to furnish you with the necessary document, and the one that is specified there is the BTC resolution. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Now, the BCT resolution is contained on page 32, but the email attaching it is on page 31, if you may turn there. Are you there on page 31?
I am, Chair.
And correctly so, it's from Ms. Maya Bana,
That is correct.
and directed, it's addressed to you,
Correct.
and it says extract of the PTC minutes.
Correct.
Take the transaction. But what I fail to understand is that the date is on the 19th of April 2016. Was this the first time that it was dispatched to you and the team? This extract?
No, Chair, I believe we got this thing a little bit earlier than the 19th of April. So we had 2 copies. There was a formal copy sent to us from Maya. There was also a physical copy delivered to us from Suzanne Daniels of this extract.
When were they delivered to you?
Chair, I can't exactly remember, but it had to have been after the date she signed this extract.
Yes. So what I'm trying to say is that you see that this extract, let's go to the extract. It's on page 32. The date is the 15th of April 2016.
That is correct.
So that is the only time when she is certified as a true extract of the meeting.
That is correct, Chair.
Yes. So you could not have actually received it much more earlier than this date.
That is correct, Chair. What we could have possibly received, which I cannot confirm, is we could have received an unsigned extract. There's probably a process that Suzanne needs to follow in getting this extract signed off, and thereafter we might have then received this copy. But I can't confirm whether we exactly received the extract or not.
Yes, I'm trying to clarify your evidence in line with what is contained in the statement,
Okay?
in all fairness to you. If you have received an unsigned copy on the 13th or earlier than that, surely you would have reflected that in the statement. Am I correct?
Yes, Chair. Yes. Yes.
I want to be fair to you. I mean, you are talking about these documents on, as I indicated to you, from paragraphs, from paragraph 4.1 to 4.3. And what you are saying in paragraph 4.3, you say that you were referring to the events of the 13th, and you annex the copies of what one assumes must be the copies of what you've received as per what is stated in that paragraph. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Yes. And I'm posing those questions in light of what you have stated, that you have received those copies on the 13th. But when you look at these, the resolution or the extract, the date of the extract is the 15th of April 2016, long after the payment was made. Am I correct?
That is correct.
When you look at the email on page 31, Annexure SN3, it's even way beyond that period, because it's on the 13th or on the 19th of April 2016, and she says, please see attached as promised. And I take it this is the time when she then sent you this relevant document.
That is correct. Can I add some context to that?
Yes, please.
So if I read 4.3, I didn't say we received the extract, the BTC minutes on the 13th. We said we also received a copy of the extract from Ms. Naidu attached as Annexure SN3. So I'm confirming that we received the extract. I'm not confirming that it came on the 13th of April, but Mr. Mokoena, you are correct. In the initial request from Ms. Naidu on the 13th, the discussion that we had on the telephonic discussion, I had requested the board tender committee resolutions, an extract of the resolutions. So we had requested it from her. If you look at the email that she sent us on the 13th of April, she also states there that the minutes of the resolution will be forwarded by Suzanne Daniels later that day. The extract, the formal extract or the signed off extract could not have been sent at the day. It could only have been sent on the 15th after the day. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No. It brings much more confusion, because
Okay.
I thought that the documents that we are having here are the documents which you say were received as per what we read in paragraph 4.3. And I'm posing those questions in the light of what is stated there. But it appears that you are referring to other documents which are not annexed to this statement, which might have received on the same day of the 13th. Did you receive an extract of the BTC on the 13th?
No, Chair.
Yes, and that's the reason why I'm posing those questions. And
Okay.
would it be fair that from reading the documents that support your statement, the extract of the minute was only certified as true on the 15th of April?
That is correct, Chair.
And this was sent to you as per your documents only on the 19th of April, as per Annexure SN3.
So as per Annexure SN3 that I confirm, but I had even said we were provided with a copy of the resolution by Ms. Daniels of our legal department.
Yes.
So I am confirming that we had received a physical copy of the extract earlier than the 19th sent from Ms. Naidu. But I cannot confirm exactly what time and date that physical copy was received.
Could it be before the payment or after the payment?
It would have been after the payment, Chair.
Yeah.
And to give context to that as well, I did not need the board tender committee minutes to effect the payment because I had a signed contract in front of me.
Yes. No, I'm dealing with the documents that you're having, I understand. Now, if I may refer you to paragraph 4.4 of your statement. You are now in that paragraph telling us how this prepayment was processed. Am I correct?
That is correct?
Can you please summarize the contents of that paragraph for us? Now we are now talking at the stage when it's
Yeah.
now processed.
Chairperson, so we had spoken about us receiving the formal instructions and the contracts at 12:38 p.m. So we had, assuming immediately if the email was opened, we had 1 hour and about 22 minutes to effect this transaction. I'd explained to you the process if it had to occur in a manner, so in a normal course of business, how a process should have occurred, and that did not occur. We also had to effect this payment to Tegeta, like I said, before 2 p.m. Chairperson, if I can just give one more context. So you could have a vendor, a particular supplier, that has multiple contracts with Eskom. So in this particular case, Tegeta had a contract with, so they had this prepayment contract, which was not loaded on the system. And to effect the payment, we needed it loaded on the system. Tegeta also had another contract with Eskom, and I think you have been exposed to it throughout those hearings, but we had a contract called the Brakfontein contract, the Brakfontein coal supply agreement. So same vendor, just two separate contracts. So in order to effect this payment, what we did, there was no time within this 1 hour, 22 minutes to follow that process that I had described earlier to you. So what the team did, and Chairperson, before they did this, there was an approval sought, so I'll get to the approval a little later. But what they did was they amended a purchase order on the Brakfontein contract to reflect call it an order of 659 million, and the payment to Tegeta was effected against the Brakfontein contract. So same vendor getting the same money, but just via the Brakfontein agreement. And then, subsequent to that, the correct process that I explained to you earlier was followed, and this transaction against the Brakfontein contract was reversed and was then processed against this 659 million prepayment contract. So effectively, that's how this contract is, this clause 4.4 is basically explaining how that payment was effected. It's important to note, Chair, that before this was done, a payment control form was prepared, and we do that for every payment. And the payment control form, and I think it is on...
We'll deal with it in due course, but it's
Okay.
SASN 4A. Is it the one that was signed by
Ms. Naidu.
Snyder?
Yes. So the payment control form reflects who we're paying, contracts, those kind of details. And that was approved, and then the payment was effected against the Brakfontein agreement and later corrected. So that's how the 659 payment was effected.
So in short, the normal processes and procedures were not followed. Yes.
Chairperson, given the time, it could not be followed.
Yes. And also, we now know that this payment was effected against another contract, not the one which was initially envisaged in the agreement.
That is correct.
Do you know why that was done?
Chairperson, like I said, if we had to load, so you've got the signed agreement in front of you. Now the signed agreement needs to be loaded onto the SAP system. Now in order to load the SAP system, I need to then follow this process we described before,
Yes.
which was pre the contract even being signed and
Yeah.
post the contract being signed. Now you could not, in order to have followed that process, you needed all the different
You needed to have had all the documentation that would have been produced by that process.
not only the documentation, also the people at that point in time available
Yes.
and ready and available to execute the transaction that I described. So
Yes.
that time was not available, and hence it had to be done this way.
What made it easier to do it using the Brankfontein contract as opposed to in the place of the one that should have been followed? In other words,
Yeah, it's a function of time.
were there certain people who were immediately available in regard to Brankfontein that were not available in regard to this one? Exactly what was the difference? So you are faced with a contract where payment must be made within a very short space of time, but the system, in order for the payment to be effected, requires certain people to play their respective roles and certain documentation to be available, I assume. Now, that documentation is not available because that process was not followed in regard to this contract that in respect of which payment must be made. Is that right?
Chair, let me clarify.
Yeah.
So at 12:38 p.m., you now have documentation available because you've got the signed agreement, and the signed
Yes.
agreement says, please effect this agreement.
Yes.
The issue from 12:38 p.m. to 2 p.m. is that process I explained to you. So the first time you actually see the construct of this agreement is after 12:38 p.m. when
Yes.
you see that. Now, that process I explained earlier, not everyone is seeing that agreement. Not everyone is possibly or potentially at the office to effect this agreement. And it's not as if go get any contract manager and go and get any buyer. There are certain people that can process transactions in certain sort of environments. They segregate the duties for control. So what I'm saying is that the documentation is there. Now it's an issue of time, and it's a question of availability of people, and to process a payment within that required time. And that was not available on the 13th of April to effect this payment at 2 p.m.
So are you saying that in terms of documentation, you had all the documentation that was necessary? The difficulty was certain people who needed to be available.
Chair, again, I explained earlier that said before this contract was signed, what should have happened was that this purchase requisition process should have been loaded. That was not done. So already there's a process missing and there's an agreement in front of you. Now I'm saying, on top of that, so you first got to go do this process. Then post the contract, there's another process you still need to follow. And by various people, so I'm talking various contract managers now, to effect that, to get those people within that 1 hour and 22 minutes to all play a part in this role would have been impossible. And to give you an idea, we had strongly pushed, so once the payment was done against the Brankfontein contract, we'd strongly pushed to correct the entry against the correct contract. So what I'm saying is the payment is done under the Brankfontein contract to the same vendor. We then reverse the transaction against the Brankfontein contract and process it against the prepayment contract. Now that process took a couple days to get done. It didn't happen immediately on the same day, which kind of gives you an idea of how long it takes people to actually sometimes do all of this.
I accept that given the time constraints you couldn't get the normal process that should have been followed to be followed. Okay. But my question is, why was it easier? Or what was the need to use Brankfontein? I would imagine that if you are unable to use what, let's call it the normal procedure that you would have followed, because people can't be brought together within. Will that contain? Will you not? How about that? You won't be faced with. Fontaine, that's what I want you to clarify.
The reason why the because the vendor, the supplier, was the same supplier. So the banking details, bank accounts were all the same, so it was better. Fontaine contract, where the bank accounts and the people you be paying is the same person as the 659 million contract. So why it's easier to use the Braakfontein agreement is because the Braakfontein contract had tenure, meaning period of the agreement, also had value. So it could accommodate a 659 million rand payment, same party that we wanted to pay under the 659 million agreement. So Braakfontein was easier to use. I could not use an optimum contract or a, call it any other contract to pay, because it would have paid a different vendor.
So, for purposes of effecting payment, if you used the Braakfontein contract, you did not need the people that you would have needed if you used this new contract.
That is correct.
And is that because in regard to the Braakfontein contract, all information that you would have needed was already in the system?
That is correct.
And you did not need any particular person or official to okay anything if you used Braakfontein?
No, Chair, there was a transaction process.
Yes.
So on the Braakfontein contract, there was an order for coal already in the system.
Yes.
That order for the coal was amended, and it was amended for 659 million rand.
Oh.
It was then effected as received, and the transaction paid.
So that the documentation now reflected that there was an order, this 659 million rand related to an order coming from Braakfontein. That's
Yes.
how it looked like.
On the system, yes.
On the system, yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, all right.
And then subsequent to that, it was corrected and changed to the right order, or the right contract.
But this whole process now of using Braakfontein, the Braakfontein contract for actually another contract, and later on correcting, those procedures, were they acceptable procedures, or were you all people doing something wrong in order to effect this payment?
Chair, it is not an ideal or correct procedure to follow. It was the only procedure we could do to effect the transaction. And hence we, via this payment control form, got it approved before we effected it.
But do you accept, or do you not, that it was a wrong procedure?
I accept.
Yes. And you all resorted to it because you needed to comply with this instruction to effect payment before 2 o'clock.
That is correct.
But it was not part of ESCOM procedures.
That is correct.
Okay.
Why the rush? Did you ask as to why the rush? Why are you placed under this extreme pressure to effect that payment and to do the wrong things?
Chairperson, I mean, I thought, so the first thing is that there is this contract that's approved by the board to which we have no context to the discussion or why the board tender committee is approving such a contract. There is an instruction from the CFO's office, and that's not a light office, that's the CFO of Eskom, requesting us to pay this thing before 2 p.m. And, I mean, as intriguing or as startling as this request was, it was also, there is a request from the highest office or one of the highest officers in Eskom to please effect. So let's effect this transaction. Yes, I accept that the incorrect process was followed, but before we did that, we sought approval for that as well to ensure. Now, if we understood at a transactional level the context of why this prepayment was so important, then maybe a different decision or so would have been followed. But at that point in time, it was 1 hour and 22 minutes. The team had to effect this transaction, and they didn't understand the context of it except, please do it and do it now.
So you are merely carrying out the instructions,
Absolutely.
incorrect as they may be.
Absolutely.
Now, did you just say a few seconds ago that you sought approval even to use this wrong procedure in order to effect payment?
That is correct.
From whom did you seek approval?
From Ms. Naidu.
And is she the one who provided approval, or did she go higher up to the board or tender committee to get approval for the use of this wrong procedure, as far as you know?
Chairperson, my understanding of the events, and I was not there, my colleague carried it out.
Yes.
But before he effected the transaction,
Yes.
he had this payment control form in the form of
Yes.
SN4A prepared,
Yes.
and that was then taken to Maya for signature.
Yes.
My understanding is the signature, and if we look at the contents of this payment control
Yes.
form,
Yes.
approve that you are doing what you are doing.
Okay.
The discussion between Chris, my colleague, and Ms. Naidu, I can't confirm exactly what the discussion was and whether Maya followed a different process before
Yeah.
she signed. I
Yeah.
cannot confirm that.
And you came back from your meeting with a client after the payment had been effected.
That is correct.
So all of this was happening in your absence. The last thing that you did was you asked your colleague, I think you said, is it
Mr. Christo Kruger.
Mr. Christo Kruger, to basically carry out do what was needed to be done, and you told him about the instruction from Ms. Naidu.
Chairperson, yes. After the telephone call, the initial telephone call, I had instructed Christo to assist me in carrying it out.
Yes.
There were conversations between Christo and I,
In
either
between.
via WhatsApp, telephone
Yeah.
calls during that period to
Okay,
say, are we
okay.
covered here?
Yes,
So there
okay,
were that
okay.
conversation. It wasn't just,
Okay.
please do it and I'll see
Yes,
you later.
Yes.
No.
Okay, all right.
No.
So somewhere he consulted you on some of the challenges, and you made your input, and then you came back after payment had been effected.
Yeah, when I got back to the office and
Yes.
really started looking at the detail,
Yes.
in my personal capacity,
Yes.
this transaction had already been effected. That
Yes.
is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Can I refer you to page 37?
I am on 37.
What is that document?
That is the payment control form that I have been referring to now.
And this is the document you say to the chair, upon receiving it, you then carry the instructions. You are satisfied that there is authority and you may proceed with the prepayment.
Chairperson, I confirm that this is the document where all the different, the construct of the payment and the important elements of the payment is being signed off as, okay, for every payment, yes, for every payment that occurs within our area, you will see this form with its construct of what are we paying, and the delegated people signing off as.
Is that 37? Did you say 37?
37.
Oh, okay.
It's annexure SN4A. So you say that you paid on the strength of this document. Once you see that it was signed by Ms. Maya Bana, you are satisfied, by Ms. Naidu.
So this is the approval form. The payment is made on the strength of this approval form, plus the invoice, plus the supporting contract behind it.
Yes. Okay. May I refer you to page 4, paragraph 4.5.
What's the page?
Page 4, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Now, in this paragraph, you confirm, you say that Mr. Kruger confirmed that the money was indeed transferred as per the instruction around 2 o'clock on the same day, on the 13th of April.
Yeah, so Mr. Kruger confirmed that according to the Treasury team, the funds were in the bank account ready for payment. It is another member of my team, Anthea Cupido, who confirmed that the actual payments were effected.
Yeah. How much is effected?
728 million.
So this was this was an amount not initially referred to as 659, but there were other invoices that were paid also.
That is correct. So if you go back to the instruction email from Ms. Naidu,
Yes.
you will see that it said, please pay the invoice of 659 million, and please pay 2 other invoices that were due to Tegeta Resources if we could make that payment earlier for a 1% settlement discount.
Yes, we'll come to those additional amounts. So the total that was paid before 2 o'clock was 728 million odd rands.
That is correct.
Yes. And in paragraph 5, you elaborate as to why, in your opinion, this was an unusual payment.
That is correct.
Can you please elaborate? Why was it unusual?
Chairperson, the first thing is that we don't normally make prepayments, or we don't upfront pay for coal or a service and then only receive the service. You generally tend to receive a service and then pay for it. So already, if one, that was unusual. The second unusual part about this thing is the timing. To have this contract and a payment made in that time, the 1 hour and 22 minutes that we refer to, was unusual. For the amount, the people involved being started, and with all the processes that possibly were not followed, that was unusual. The other unusual part about this transaction, Chair, is that a prepayment generally lends to additional risk. So what I mean is, if I upfront pay and I haven't received the services, there's an additional credit risk, if I to put it, against me receiving those goods which I have not. And should I not receive that services, then I've got to follow a process, be it a litigation process or whatever process, to recover this money. And that's just additional risk that one doesn't want. Yes, to an extent it was covered by shares in the contract, but why would I want shares of a company that can't pay me? And the agreement refers to pledged shares. So what are the pledged shares? So it just brings on additional risk. It's unusual, and it's not normally what you would want to. It's not normally a transaction you would want to enter into, or that we normally do enter into.
Would it have been, or whose responsibility would it have been to check what Tegeta's shares were worth at the time, to the extent that it was said, the agreement said that a security would be provided by way of shares?
Chairperson,
In other words, I imagine that ESCOM should not place any reliance in terms of whatever transaction they make on shares unless they knew what those shares were worth.
Chairperson, if I refer you back to the Board Tender Committee resolution, and I think it was at point 2 of the resolution, it said that the CFO needs to make sure. So I assume that the CFO and the legal person that drafted this agreement took into account that
Those
very
things.
concept
Yeah.
that you've just brought up.
Okay.
But I'm speculating.
Yeah, okay.
But we know that that agreement was signed on the 13th of April, the same day when the payment was effected. When could due diligence having been being done by any person?
I cannot confirm the due diligence, but
Did you ever get to know why this rush in terms of this payment?
no, Chair.
You
I
never
do
got
not.
to know?
No.
Okay.
But I mean, you held quite a senior position at the time of this transaction, and you are a CA. Did you question what was happening? Did you ask someone that why are we advancing such money to Tegeta, such huge money within this short space of time, with wrong processes and procedures, others being corrected post facto the payment?
Absolutely, Chair. I mean, a payment like this, the process, the company involved, it was certainly startling. But here comes an instruction from your board. And I don't get to see the board minutes. I don't know what the board discussion is. I don't know what the reference point of the board is, except you got an extract that says, please, do these 1, 2, or 3 things. So you are right. I mean, at every level of the organization, those questions were being asked. But to get context, I mean, we're not privy to that, and I don't know it. And I never received a conclusive answer to that question.
But did you ask it the question?
Chairperson, yes. And I'm
To
saying
whom
I've never
and what
received
did they say?
except that the board approved this thing or a discussion happened at the board, Chair. I certainly never received I call it an adequate response or a good response in any way.
To whom did you ask the question?
Chairperson, I can't confirm right now, but I think we asked a lot of people. I would have certainly asked Maya at that time. I would have certainly asked my other superiors and principals in the organization. But, I mean, I don't know if they also knew the answer, to be frank, I don't know, except that this is the discussion that took place at the board. And at that point, I think also there was a lot of leakage of information in ESCOM. So there was this added, call it protection and security around whatever discussions took place. So it was even harder to get any context to certain transactions.
But would it be fair to say everyone who dealt with this transaction ought to have found it suspicious with all the fissures that it has and how it was dealt with?
Chairperson,
Would it surprise you if somebody didn't see anything suspicious about it?
Chairperson, it was certainly, this transaction was certainly startling. So, I mean, I'm not going to deny it wasn't startling. The question you're asking is, did you raise the questions? There was a response given. And I think some of those responses were even on TV by some of our executives about, and I'm scant on exactly what was said, but it was something about Optimum needed to restart its operations. We couldn't find the coal anywhere else. We needed to procure coal from them. They were the only available supplier. They had to restart their...
No, I take it that that's much later after the payment. I'm talking more around the day that payment had to be made. that whoever had something to do with it to try and get the payment effected must have found that there was something suspicious about this payment. What would you say that would be unfair? There may be people who didn't think there was something suspicious about this.
No, Chair, like I said, the transaction was certainly startling and intriguing. The issue is that at the time when the teams received this, to the time they effected payment, I think it was more about let's carry out the instruction. Yes, there's a concern, there's intriguing, but there's also an instruction. So let's carry that out. We can worry about call it the story later. And that was certainly the view on the 13th of April date.
Okay.
You keep on using the words startling and intriguing. I mean, governance issues were at stake in this transaction. Am I correct?
Chair, governance issues were at stake, and I thought we had followed them by getting the approvals and necessary supporting documentations and stuff like that.
And dealing with the matter by means of incorrect procedures as well.
I thought we had gotten approval for that. Okay. Hence, I'm saying I thought governance and stuff was covered.
Now, can we
Well,
move?
probably governance issues were not covered if you used the wrong procedures, but you may have, that is when I say you and your team may have covered yourselves by making sure that there was approval for the wrong procedure to be used. You may have covered yourself against anybody senior saying, but why did you follow a procedure that is not part of ESCOM? Then you would say, well, we got approval from Ms. Naidu or somebody.
Chair, it's covering yourself against an instruction to pay something at a certain time.
Yes,
so,
no.
Yes.
No, what I'm saying is your answer seems to suggest that you were covered in terms of doing something that you, and I'm talking about you and your team, that you could see was wrong in terms of the procedure. You covered yourself. But there is nothing based on your own evidence that suggests that this whole transaction was done in a manner that showed respect for issues of proper governance and so on.
Yes, Chair, we certainly didn't follow the correct procedure in the way it should have been normally done.
Yeah, okay.
What could have happened, Mr. Naga, if you told whoever that instructed you to say that, I'm a chartered accountant. I am here at ESCOM to ensure that, ESCOM respect governance issues. I'm not going to append my signature or to agree that such a transaction must actually go on with my name being associated with such a transaction. I'm not going to support it. Didn't you have that choice at the time? I know that you say it's an instruction.
Chair, again, I think one needs to, I think we need to be a bit careful. So here I've got my board and, like I said, the highest office instructing us to do something. There's a fine line, and I don't know the context of the instruction and where it's coming from, and I don't know the details behind it, except here's it's, do it. That, Chair, is one. There is certainly, like I had used the word startling and intrigue. Why am I paying somebody 659 million to prepay for coal? And I don't understand the details behind that. On the back of that, I think not doing this is also insubordination. And Chair, if I can give you context, I mean, we have had experiences where we have had agreements, as an example, within our area, we had a transporter, we've got coal transporters that transport coal for us. Those transporters have a contract and a rate associated with the contract. We, through one of our cost-saving mechanisms, have had that contract reduced, meaning the price reduced. Machela Cocoa went to the board and asked the board, or for some reason, again, we don't understand the context to it because we don't know the discussion at the board, asked them to reverse that price-saving proposal. When the head of the then Primary Energy tried to refuse, as you put it, she was suspended. And later, sort of exited the organization. Now that whole process of not following an instruction, Chair, is ugly, if I can say it, and expensive. And when you follow that, you're on your own from an ESCOM perspective. There's no support behind you there. So I think, I'm not trying to use that as an excuse. I'm saying, but understand that here's an instruction from an entity. When you don't follow it, that's the one leg of how they treat you. So here you're sitting with the transaction. I don't understand the context. I'm making sure that from a transactional/governance point of view, we are covered because there's an instruction. Make sure you've got it. So I think that was really the mindset on the 13th of April when this transaction was being effected.
And all of this is supposed to happen within a very short space of time. There is not enough time to try and get all the answers.
That is correct.
So you have to think about what you do. Do you refuse to be party to it, even though you don't have all the answers to whatever questions you might have? But at the same time, you don't want to be party to something that's not right.
Chairperson, I
Or
think,
that you suspect is not right, if it goes only up to a suspicion.
Chairperson, the transaction looks startling, it looks intriguing.
Yes.
But I'm relying on the ethics and the principles of my superiors and principals. And I'm assuming that conduct, that ethical conduct, that review, I'm missing the right word now, but the construct of this deal, insofar as it meeting the ethics, morals, values, and governance, and its value for ESCOM, was certainly considered by those decision makers. And when they instruct us to do something, that I assume is a given. Now, when I look at this thing and it looks startling, and I don't have any other information besides I am startled, it's very difficult to just push back. Had I known something more, I would have probably certainly taken a different course of action. But not knowing anything except please do something, and from the highest office in our entity, very difficult to say no.
Can I refer you, I just want to wrap up on this issue of the 6.5.
What page?
If I can refer you to page 26. And I just want to understand, your evidence in light of the documents that you had time to peruse, or maybe subsequently you did peruse. We know from reading on page 26 that what was envisaged in this agreement is for Tegeta to procure, coal from Optimum, and then it will go to ESCOM. But at that time, what was the contractual relationship between Optimum and ESCOM? Was Optimum able to fulfill its obligations?
No, and I think at that time, Optimum was also under business rescue.
Yes. Now, if this entity was unable to carry out its obligations to ESCOM at the time when they had a direct contractual relationship, what made ESCOM at this stage to believe that if now Tegeta is in place, it will be able to comply? I mean, it's the same mine.
Chairperson, I cannot comment on that question. I assume the people that discussed and signed this deal would have that answer.
There's no explanation for this.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
I can't respond to that question, Chair.
Yes, I understand. But I'm simply asking it from, this, remember that this is one of the documents which you say that you did peruse, be it after the money was paid. That, I mean, one of the things that one would have raised, your team or anyone else, was that, but why? Why take it? Why is it special? We know that they're going to source from Optimum. We are having problems with the very same mine. It is under business rescue. It can't pay us.
Chair, you're correct. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense. The question was why, and
Yes.
those questions, we also had the same concerns.
Yes. Now, I need to deal with a new topic, but I'll come back to those issues. There's just one or two things that I wanted to clarify. Can we go to paragraph 7 of your statement? It's on page 6, Mr. Chair. And in that paragraph, you are now introducing a new topic pertaining to the calculation of the penalty amount and the settlement agreement which followed thereafter. Am I right?
That's correct. Page 6, eh?
Page 6, yeah.
Yes,
Go to
correct.
page 6, yes.
Yes.
Now, before dealing with these, the contents of, or the contents under that topic, maybe to lay down the basis and for you to assist us to understand issues far much more better, would I be correct that the relationship between ESCOM and the supplier of coal would be regularized by means of a coal supply agreement?
That is correct.
That's correct, okay. And would such a contract also contain within it the specific quality of coal that must be supplied to ESCOM?
That is correct.
It will also contain within itself issues of penalty in the event that the coal does not meet the required specifications.
That is correct.
Yes. Now, just to make the chair to understand, at what time or of the transaction would a coal supplier, makes the supplier to attract, the penalties?
What would make the supplier attract penalties?
Yes.
So, Chairperson, like what was said by Mr. Mokoena, the coal supply agreement would stipulate what qualities we want to buy and what qualities the supplier needs to deliver. Normally, those qualities are a bit of a range, depending on the qualities that you are referring to. Should you be outside of that range, there could, depending on what was agreed to in the contract, penalties applied. So, for instance, if you had to give me coal with an abrasive index of less than 400, and you give me coal at an abrasive index of 500, then there's potentially a penalty associated with that supply of coal with a quality parameter that's outside of the parameters that we wanted to purchase.
Is there a process of recording such penalties?
Is there a process for recording such penalties? The process that is followed is, it depends on the supply. We've
Yes.
got 9 long-term agreements, and those long-term agreements are agreements where the coal is the coal mine is right next to the power station. For those agreements, you find coal coming across the belt, it is sampled, and the quality of that coal comes in 2-3 days later when the labs actually send the results. The quality parameters for the supply of coal, whether it's measured hourly, 3 hourly, daily, whatever it is, that quality is recorded. The quality is agreed normally between Eskom and the mine, and it is signed off by the respective geologists. For coal supply that comes in from contracts that are away from the power stations, and I'm generally speaking, generally all of those contracts are, the coal is first pre-certified. So when we talk about pre-certification, we say there's a heap of coal, they measure the qualities first. When that quality is known for that stockpile is delivered to Eskom. And that's how and that quality that is measured is agreed to again it's provided by an independent laboratory and agreed to between Eskom and the mine.
Yes. Now, let's take it as a step further. Would there be a period prescribed pertaining to when these penalties must be paid by a supplier?
That would be regulated by the agreement.
Sometimes there is what is referred to as the hardship claim. How does that come into being in these contracts?
Hardship claim. If you're specifically referring to a hardship claim, is when one party is aggrieved and wants to invoke the terms and conditions of that hardship claim. And I think the hardship claim or hardship clauses are also vary contract to contract, but that's when it would be invoked.
Yes. Now, within Eskom, who would be responsible, which division or person would be responsible to manage the coal contracts?
It is the coal operations team within the primary energy team.
And what would be the role of the contract manager? Would there be a contract manager?
They are the contract managers. So when I say coal operations team, I'm saying they are the contract managers. They manage the coal contracts and the supply of coal that we procure.
Now, in your own words, just give us, a brief synopsis of relevant background facts which led to you being responsible or responsible for the computation of the penalty in this agreement between Eskom and Optimum.
Sure. So, Chairperson, I think you are aware that there was a coal supply agreement between Eskom and Optimum Colliery for the supply of coal. Around 2014, there was a cooperation agreement that was signed between Glencore and Eskom, which sort of suspended certain terms and conditions of the contract so that the parties could negotiate a different outcome. That contract or that cooperation agreement ended around May, June 2015. When that contract ended, or that cooperation agreement ended, because the terms...
Mr. Naga, did it end or was it cancelled? Do you know? Or was it terminated?
It was certainly stopped. I would have to get the exact legal term, whether we suspend. It was certainly stopped or ended by Eskom.
Do you know by who, in particular in Eskom?
I think it was Mr. Brian Molefe, but I would have to confirm the letter suspending it.
All right, we may proceed. It's now terminated.
So Eskom had a claim, because the terms and conditions of the penalty clauses were suspended. Eskom had a retrospective claim towards Optimum Colliery for the coal they supplied, which did not meet the quality specifications as per the agreement. So we were then called into a meeting, and it's important also to note that I think at that point in time, we had appointed Cliff Decker Hofmeyer as our attorneys to deal with this matter. So at that point in time, we were called into a meeting, and my team, or specifically I, had been requested to to assist the contract managers or the coal operations team in computing this claim. I had again asked one of my senior members of my team, and it happens to be Christo Kruger, but Christo Kruger assisted me, or assisted the coal operations team in calculating this claim, and this claim amounted to this now infamous 2.1 billion rand claim that Eskom put in towards, or claim from Glencore.
Which
College.
year are we talking about here?
We are talking June, July 2015.
June, July 2015.
Yes.
That is the first computation that you did.
That is the first computation. It is also important that because this was a claim, it was my understanding that this was the initial process of a claim, and that the claim would always be revised as, call it, the dispute process unfolds or evolves.
Yes. Before you proceed, Mr. Naga, Mr. Chair, I'll be referring you to Annexure SN5 on page 40, but we realize that that document, it's not legible enough for one to can follow the evidence of the witness. We have now produced the A3, which are far much more better, and one can read them, but we have done it also in respect of Annexure SN9A, Annexure SN11A, and Annexure SN11B. We have accordingly marked them so that you're able to place them where they belong, Mr. Chair. I beg leave to
Thank you. Thank you.
hand them over to you.
Registrar. Yes.
Mr. Naidu, may I then refer you to page 40, is Annexure SN5, but you do have a far much more better copy that has been placed before you. If you can look at the A3 version of it, next to the table somewhere there.
Yes, I got it.
Yes. Now, can you take us through this schedule and explain to us as to how you arrived at the figure of 2.1 billion? Where you can, also explain to the chair what source documents did you have to peruse for you to be able to come to that figure?
Chairperson, so what you have in front of you is a summary of the calculation. If I can refer you to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Column 10 of the schedule, in the sort of dark gray shaded area, at the bottom you will see a payment called 2176530611.99, which is effectively the 2.1 billion claim that we speak about. So this is the summary of the computation. Now, the question is, how do we come out with this thing? So we have a contract. The contract regulates what coal qualities the supplier is expected to deliver, and if they deviated from the expected range, what are the penalties they would pay? So from the period March 2012 to May 2015, behind this computation sits daily coal deliveries for different parameters of coal.
I'm sorry, that is from March
March
2012
2012
to May 2015.
to May 2015.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So behind this calculation, and like I said, a summary, there is daily coal deliveries, so the quantum of coal you received, and the qualities associated with that coal. And the qualities that we are referring to is sizing, which is how fine a material is, AI, how abrasive the material is, the energy in the coal, which is the CV, and your ash content. Now that underpins this calculation. So you've got a contract, and the contract says like I had explained to you earlier, where I think I used the AI as an example, if you must give me coal with an AI of less than 400, and you give me something on a 500, then there's a possible penalty payable. Where this calculation gets very complex is that it's got a lot of, so the calculation also works on a rolling average. So if you are 3 days out of spec on a certain quality, your penalty might be nothing. But if you are 4 days out of spec on a certain penalty, then you would have a 25% penalty on the price of the coal, or there'll be a price, there's a rate that's in the contract that's determined up front when this contract was negotiated in how you would levy it. So the contract, the calculation of this penalty was derived by comparing what we received and what the contract had said, and calculating what the penalty would be.
Mr. Chair, for your
All right.
clarity, also the time periods are indicated on the extreme left-hand side. You'll see that they start from March 2012, and the last date is May
Yes.
2015, yes.
Yeah, no, I see. Well, it looks like the principle on the basis of which you made calculations is simple. You look at what the contract says the supplier must supply in terms of quality, in terms of quantity. And then you look at what was actually supplied by the supplier in terms of quality and in terms of quantity. And to the extent that what the supplier has actually supplied falls short of what is required in terms of quality and quantity by the contract, then the penalties kick in. Is that right?
In theory, Chair, you are correct.
Yeah.
It should be that simple,
Yes.
and it should operate in that manner.
Yes.
But with regards to this agreement, there was a difference in the interpretation of the penalties, that the application of the penalties and premiums for the different quality specifications.
Yes, it's the application that may have given rise to challenges.
Correct.
The principle in itself appears to be simple, but the application may have been problematic in terms of different interpretations.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chair, I see that it's 1 o'clock. Would this be appropriate time to adjourn?
Yes, let's adjourn until 2 o'clock. We adjourn.
All right.